But I know you never... Maybe you don't want to talk to me.
It's not that.
Let me finish. However, my heart was broken. It's always going to be broken. But I know yours is broken too.
Podcast audience, thank you so much for coming back to the Telling Stories podcast. If you've listened to our first 2 episodes, good for you. We appreciate that.
Good for you.
Good for you. You made it through all of that, and now you're here with Andrew Crabtree and Rick Maxedon. Rick, thanks for being here.
You got it, man. I'm so excited about this movie we're going to talk about.
Got a good one.
Yeah.
So, if you've listened to the first 2 episodes, you know. If you're new, welcome. We're going to talk about Manchester by the Sea today. 2016. It was produced by Amazon Studios. It was produced as a feature film, was released in studios, and is now available on Prime Video. So, listen. If you're,
no excuses.
No excuses. This is on Prime Video. I can't believe there's anybody in this country that doesn't have Prime Video, because as a company, I order 70% of the crap I own through Amazon.
Absolutely. I get alerts like I think I've gotten 4 since we started the podcast.
Shipped.
Your Amazon order has arrived.
Yeah. So listen, almost everyone that's ever going to listen to this has Prime Video. If you have an Amazon Prime subscription for free shipping, you have Prime Video whether you know it or not. So go and watch Manchester by the Sea. Hit pause on this podcast. Watch it, come back, and you'll be acclimated, because this movie being 2 years old, I have no qualms offering spoilers.
That's right.
Spoilers will be heavy, so if you haven't seen it, go watch it.
And even if you don't have, I think the movie works if you know everything that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Because it's not about the climax, it's about the story.
I agree. Starting this episode off like we did our Goonies episode last week. Kudos to you if you watched that. But our Rotten Tomatoes scores, I like the Rotten Tomatoes website, just because I love the fact that they have we're going to go with thermometer.
Sure. Well, why don't we do this? Why don't you choose one and I'll do the other?
I'll say thermometer.
And I'll say tomatomer.
Okay.
Tomatomer? I just said tomatomer.
Tomato. Being the critical analysis, so it's some kind of a culmination of critical analysis and scores is reflected in that thermometer. And the audience score is, as it says, just a straight rating based on non-critical analysis, people if they enjoyed the film or not.
Yeah.
So last week we did the Goonies, which had a almost directly inverse score of this movie. I'm going to pull my paper back up here. So the thermometer on the Goonies, the critical analysis being 70%, the audience score being 91%.
Yeah.
This movie...
This one is inverse of that, almost.
Almost identically inversed. So the thermometer on Manchester by the Sea, 95%, so very critically acclaimed. Mm-hmm. I think it drew their certified fresh emblem, if you're familiar with that.
Certified fresh.
I like that. And then the audience score being 77. So almost taking almost nearly identical numbers and inverting them.
Yeah. And I think that's really cool, because you chose the Goonies.
Yep.
And I chose this one, Manchester by the Sea, and it kind of speaks to what we're drawn to in our stories. Completely. I like the stories, I like themes, I like even heavy or deeper themes, and I like honestly, for me, if I see a high audience score and a low tomato meter score, I'm like, I don't want to see that movie.
And I'm the opposite. So to me, I'm like, oh, those it looks critics, what do they know?
Right.
So to me, I look at films as entertainment value first.
Right.
So does it entertain me? Does it keep my mind engaged?
Right.
And sometimes that's the adventure story, but I will say that this movie did that for me as well.
Yeah.
So even having that inverted score, I really enjoyed this movie. But it is fun to point out some of those subtle differences in the way we're going to look at these things.
Right. And it also points out the differences in these 2 movies and what they are.
Very different.
One is allegorical and one is just thematic. And so I've been really looking forward to having this conversation with you. And
it's going to be fun. And I will say that we have not talked about this movie together a lot going into this.
You just saw it for the first time yesterday.
I saw it for the first time yesterday. So what we're doing with this, guys, is for those that don't know, I pick a movie, Rick picks a movie. I pick a movie, Rick picks a movie. So that way, one of us for sure is going to be passionate about that movie.
Yeah.
And 2, because we have these little differences in styles, you're going to get a more well-rounded catalog.
Yeah.
So it's really exciting. But I will say that I watched this for the first time yesterday, and I was consumed by it.
Yeah.
It like spoke to me deeply and like just froze me on the couch. Like I kind of got up from the couch with a little bit of a backache. 'Cause I think I just sat there leaned in on it, like not moving.
There's several really, really good scenes. And a good thing is you can go to YouTube and watch these really good scenes. And they're like 3, 4, 5 minutes long. And you can, in the middle of a workday, steal a few minutes and check it out and really re-engage with it.
I'm not moving to Boston, Uncle A.
No, I don't want to talk about that
You
right
said he
now.
left you money so you could move.
Yeah, that doesn't mean...
Anyway, what's in Boston? You're a janitor.
So this film, a little background, a little context, was written and directed by Kenneth Lonergan. Does not have a very extensive body of work, interestingly enough. Lonergan, if you look, pull up that trusty IMDb, he has 9 writing credits, 4 acting credits, and 3 directing credits to his name. Not a young guy either.
Right.
So, but the projects that he's been on have been fairly significant.
Yeah. This one in particular.
This one particularly, critically acclaimed. Lonergan, from what I understand and from what I've read on him, is borderline control freak.
Okay.
So you'll notice a lot of the movies that he directs or produces, he has written. Mm-hmm. So he wrote a movie called Margaret, directed it. He wrote a movie called You Can Count on Me, which saw a lot of critical acclaim in the early 2000s. Wrote and directed both of those movies, as he did with Manchester by the Sea.
Right.
Wrote and directed it.
And there's an interesting story how this movie kind of came into existence, right? Tell that story with John Krasinski and Matt Damon.
So John Krasinski and Matt Damon are both good friends of Kenneth Lonergan, and it was actually, I believe, John Krasinski that had
his idea.
It was his seed of an idea for this movie. He and Matt Damon approached Lonergan and said, "This is our seed of an idea. We want you to write it." So Lonergan wrote the screenplay, and Matt Damon was actually originally scheduled to direct and star as Lee Chandler in the film.
Which is interesting, given the control freak of Lonergan. Like, he was going to allow Damon to
direct it. Damon had a scheduling conflict. Was not able.
The Martian,
to,
right? I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
and which is a great movie too.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Matt Damon relinquished control of directing to Lonergan. And they brought in Casey Affleck to play Lee Chandler, which couldn't have worked out better.
Kind of handpicked by Damon. Right. He was like, you need to get Casey for this.
Yeah, very, very cool story. So those guys both have producers' credits in this. Okay. So they were both through the project, even if they weren't directing it. Was nominated for 6 Oscars.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Right, and probably should have won more than it won. I think it got 2, right?
It won 2. Lonergan won the Best Original Screenplay for the film. And then Casey Affleck won Best Actor.
Yeah.
Deservedly so.
One of the best acting performances in recent years in my mind.
It just made me feel pain watching Casey Affleck act this character.
Yep.
So one of the things that to me stood out about this film, as somebody who is an amateur videographer of sorts, it is very beautifully shot. The coloring and some of the angles and the way this story visually is told. Mm-hmm. Visually being not special effects, being not CGI, being not explosions or chase scenes, but just very cinematically significant to me.
Like, one of the things that drew me to having conversations with you to begin with about this podcast was your video that you showed about like CGI and action have replaced
video,
have those CGI and action have replaced good acting and good writing. And so whenever I see a movie the only thing about Manchester by the Sea that's attractive is the writing and the acting. There's nothing else that happens.
Yeah, it's literally just a narrative.
Yeah.
It is dialogue driven, it's situationally driven.
Right.
But there's no effects on this film at all.
No.
But it's still beautiful.
Right. It's just the struggle of life.
Okay, so speaking of this film being, I call it cinematically beautiful, it's part of that to me is its location.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful in a kind of a different way. It's not like we're shooting in Hawaii on the beaches. This film takes place in Manchester, Massachusetts, thus Manchester by the Sea. Yeah. And it's the Northeast and the New England area in winter is a very cold, very unforgiving, harsh place.
Yeah.
And how much better of a setting could that be playing into the narrative
I mean, it's perfect.
It
it's
just
perfect.
fits.
So, give a little bit of a synopsis of the movie, and here's where the spoilers come in. So, take a chance now if you haven't seen it and want to see it to pause. But Casey Affleck's character is Lee Chandler, and Lee Chandler lives a great life, has 2 young daughters. Everything is great, living in Manchester by the Sea, and it's a great life. And during a drunken mistake, he leaves the fireplace open, and a log falls out of the fireplace while he's walking to the store to buy more alcohol, more beer, and that log comes out and burns the place down. His wife is able to escape, but the kids are not, and so his children literally burn in a house because he made a drunken mistake.
And 2 things about that just haunted me. I mean, just affected me deeply watching it, where when he walks up on the scene, did it almost feel like to you that he was like, at that moment, he became an outsider?
Yeah.
He stands at the back of the crowd. And this is a guy who earlier, 2 minutes earlier in the movie was the life of the party, right?
Right, yeah.
He's like got his buddies and they're drinking beer and playing ping pong at 2 in the
silly
morning.
with his wife and kids and buddies and
very socially engaged, very connected. Then 2 minutes later in the movie, he's standing behind the crowd holding this bag of of beer.
Yeah.
And
alone.
Yeah. The demeanor, the facial expression, it all changed and it never came back.
And that's why I'm glad you picked that up, because I hadn't noticed that particular scene, but that is exactly what draws me into this movie, is the theme of forgiveness and willing to be forgiven and forgiving yourself or accepting the forgiveness of other people. There's several scenes that kind of point that out. We'll talk about those later, but this idea that he finds himself and holds himself accountable and responsible for the death of his children and the subsequent depression of himself and his wife, that he just removes himself from life. And you were talking about the harsh Northeast winter of that, and I think that's a metaphor that they're trying to say in this movie, is that he becomes the land.
Yeah.
He
It's
becomes
a reflection of his
frozen.
Heart. Yeah.
Yeah.
How hard was it for you to watch them putting those little burn up bodies in body bags?
Yeah, I don't
They
remember.
didn't show anything graphically, but just the concept of them walking out of the charred ashes of this house.
I don't remember what I did the first time I saw it, but I'm sure I looked away. I saw it in a theater on one of the first weekends.
I just stood there frozen. I couldn't look away, but I was just frozen by it. It just.
Yeah.
And anyone that's a parent, not to take this movie too seriously, but I told the story, I think, in the intro episode. I literally went and
hugged your kids.
I hugged my child. I was like, oh my gosh, I will never take you for granted.
Right. I can't even imagine. And so the dark place that he goes, he just can't forgive himself.
In his situation, I don't know if I could either.
Yeah.
I'm sure God's grace would eventually break through that wall, as a believer, but man, that would be
right. And
could
I think
there be anything harder?
There's another metaphor that they can't. So at the story, we get Lee Chandler, Casey Affleck's character, has to go back to Manchester by the Sea. He's moved to Boston, and he's got to go back to Manchester by the Sea because his brother has died and of heart disease.
Yeah, congestive heart failure.
Right. So there's literal heart failure and metaphorical heart failure.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
Wow.
So his brother dies from this literal heart failure, and he's dying from this metaphorical heart failure. But even more is he can't bury his brother because the ground is frozen.
Yeah.
And
it's this perfect juxtaposition of brother's heart, Lee's heart, and the setting.
Right. And even from the grave, Lee Chandler's older brother is trying to warm his heart to allow peace to come into his life. And it's so incredible. And the other part, since the ground is frozen, they can't bury his brother, they've got to wait till spring. There's 3 or 4 scenes throughout the movie where Lee Chandler's nephew, Patrick, he can't wait to get his dad buried and
it's
to closure.
him.
And so he goes and checks where his dad's going to be buried to see if the ground's still frozen. So it's just kind of inserting these little 30-second clips of the movie where he's checking the ground.
Yeah, and even to
he's
the point where he has a
ground.
panic attack opening the freezer to get
Right.
some frozen food out because he
Yeah.
he just has this really difficult time with his dad in the freezer.
And it's the power of forgiveness and the hardness of a heart that, and I think there's lots of different themes here. Like Lee Chandler can't forgive himself.
Yeah.
Lee Chandler can't accept the forgiveness that other people are trying to give to him. And it posed like he's now living alone.
So, when I watch movies, I want to hear your thoughts on this, but when I watch movies, I try to identify with a character in the movie, and it's not always the lead character. There's lots of characters that I pick out that are not lead characters that I really kind of find myself in.
Yeah.
And I was trying really hard to identify. I don't identify with Lee Chandler's character because I've never experienced the type of trauma that Lee Chandler has.
Right.
So I look at myself as Lee Chandler pre-devastation. Life of the party, very social, having people over to the house, playing ping pong, drinking beer in the basement.
Yeah. What are you doing tonight?
Yeah. So seeing him on the other side of that moment where he's at the back of the crowd with his heart ripped in half.
Yeah.
I don't identify with that because I've never experienced that level of trauma. So I spent the movie trying to see the world through Lee Chandler's eyes and how would I act if that had happened to me. And Casey Affleck just nailed it.
Yeah. Perfect.
Because the torture and pain without being overdone, without being overly acted, he just assumed this subtle torture through the rest of the movie.
Willingly accepting the subtle torture, I think, because he thinks he deserves
Almost
it.
self-exiled. He left Manchester to go live a pretty humble life in Boston.
Yeah.
A very lonely, exiled life in Boston.
Yeah.
And there's a scene where to finish off the plot synopsis, Lee Chandler has been given basically guardianship of 16-year-old Patty and all of his brother's estate, and with the assumption that he would move back to Manchester and help Patty live his life. And he tells Patty, he said, "I can't do it."
Right.
What was it? There was a line. He said it more eloquently than that, but he said, "I can't beat it.
I can't beat it.
I can't beat it, Patty.
He says
I can't beat it."
He says it 3 or 4 times.
Why can't you stay? Come on, Patty. I can't beat it. I can't beat it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And it was like, wow.
Yeah.
Like, could I?
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
As a Christian experiencing that, you'd like to think that you could because you have more of a source of hope and inspiration. But, But man, just like,
but
Patty,
even,
I can't beat it.
Even then, there's a lot of times where I feel as a pastor, when I'm counseling with somebody, I feel like I have the biblical response to say to somebody, but not the authority to speak it to you. Yeah. Because I haven't been responsible for the death of my children, and I haven't done haven't experienced things that you've experienced. I can, hey, this is what the scriptures say, and now you kind of deal with it. And that's why I love this movie, because there's no resolution. Right. Like, here's a problem. How are you going to deal with it? So I like this. You said that you try to find yourself relating to somebody. The posture that I watched this movie with was this hope. And I hoped that someone would be able to break through this loneliness that he was feeling. Like,
and you Patrick, felt like so many times that we were going to.
Right, like Patrick was going to do it. And like there's the scene that you said off air that you feel like we're intruding on a life here throughout this movie. There's a scene that really lights that when Patrick finds out that his dad has died. He's at hockey practice, and you can just kind of see across. It's like
he
the
turns
coach
and sees his uncle standing there.
Right. So it's like the coach and they're having a conversation. He comes over, and like I feel like in that moment, Lee Chandler's going to see the heartbreak of his kid, and he's going to rise above his own heartbreak and invest in this kid. So throughout the whole movie,
I felt like the entire movie I was waiting for that to happen.
Yeah. And then his buddy, who winds up kind of taking care of Patrick at the end of the movie. Like when they first are in the hospital scene, he's like, I'll take care of all the funeral home arrangements. And like, there's obviously a guy who loves him and cares for him. Like maybe his love and his care are going to break through. And then the best scene in the movie, I think, is where his ex-wife are together and she totally breaks down and she's trying to bring forgiveness to him. And all of the words that she says in this scene, it's Michelle Williams talking, and all the words that she says in a scene are trying to redeem or trying to break through the facade that Lee Chandler has built in him, and he's pressing through it and working through and all of the stuff that he says. He's very almost silent in the scene, but he just says over and over again, I can't beat it, I can't beat it, and or he says, there's nothing there.
I know you never. Maybe you don't want to talk to me.
It's not that.
Let me finish. However, my heart was broken. It's always gonna be broken. And I know yours is broken too. But I don't have to carry. I said things that I'm just sorry.
I can't.
I love you. Maybe I shouldn't say that.
Oh, you can say that.
It's just
I'm sorry. I've got to go.
we couldn't have lunch.
I'm really sorry. I don't think so. I thank you for saying everything that you said.
You can't just die.
I'm not.
Honey,
I want you to be happy.
honey,
and
I see you walking around here. And I
would
just
wanna
want to
talk-
tell you.
I would want to talk to you, Randy.
Please.
Please. You gotta.
Lee,
I'm
Lee, you
trying
gotta. I don't know what.
No,
I
this is
don't want
not.
to torture you.
You're not.
I
You're
don't
not
wanna
torturing me.
I just want to tell you that I was wrong.
No. You understand? There's nothing. There's nothing there. There's nothing there.
That's not true. That's not
There's nothing
true.
there. I'm serious. You don't understand. And I don't
Of
know
course
what
I
this.
do.
I know you understand. I've got to go. I'm sorry.
And when he says there's nothing there, like no, there is something there. If you
Everything's there.
Just stop. And I think that we spend. This is where kind of I'm drawn in because we spend our lives wanting to forgive and wanting to be forgiven, but there comes a time there's a spot in our lives where we just can't get past, and for him that's what it was, and he just sees. And I love the non-linear. I'm talking forever here, but I love the non-linear way that this movie is told, and that almost every flashback is Casey Affleck or Lee Chandler looking back at something bad that he did.
Yeah,
or something really great, something
that's
lots of
significant,
fun.
I think, too. I mean, and I'm going to talk about this hyperrealism in a minute, but like, would you not be flat? I mean, it has to be told that way.
Yeah,
because if you're
yeah,
living
there's
in
no
that
question.
moment and you're experiencing those emotions, that's all his life would be.
Yeah,
going back to that place for the
Right.
first time since the event.
Yeah,
and the devastation of your house burning and losing your kids, like,
and I think I'm sure this is not an intentional metaphor because I'm just sure that it's not. But the piece that I see is that this is a very Satan way to act, is to continually remind you of your failures. You did this. Your children are dead because of you. And because your children are dead because of you, you deserve to be alone. And because your children are dead because of you and you deserve to be alone, you can't allow anyone who's trying to help you. You can't allow them to get into you. And so we're continually reminded. And so these flashbacks, in my mind, are just like this. Hey, you can't be forgiven.
It's like this fear of intimacy that if he allows those people back into his lives, then he has to confront what happened all over again.
Absolutely.
And he just spends the entire film afraid to confront, the event that broke his heart.
Right. And then there's this the flashback that I like the best is they're in the scene. It's just happened, and he's in the police station, and he's telling the story about what happened walking to the liquor store and walking back, and he's telling that story, and then the police say, okay, you can go now, and he can't understand.
No, he's like waiting for them to arrest him. Like,
I got to pay for this.
Yeah, like I left the log. I didn't put the screen on the fire. Like,
yeah,
it's my fault.
There's like 30 seconds of beauty where he's walking out of the police station, walking out of the interrogation room, and he tries to grab the gun from the cop.
Yeah.
And he wants to kill himself, but there's something wrong with the gun. He can't. And there's no words that are spoken, but the score, the music just builds and crescendos, and it's like,
it's intense.
That 30 seconds is the movie.
The log must have rolled out onto the floor. And the fireman said they pulled Randy out. She passed out downstairs. And then the furnace blew, and they couldn't go back in again. And that's all I remember.
Look, Lee, you made a horrible mistake, like a million other people did last night. I'm not gonna crucify you. It's not a crime to forget to put the screen on the fireplace.
So I can go?
If something comes up we don't already know about, yeah.
Yeah, man.
And it is
what a good scene.
The darkness that we find ourselves in.
Yeah.
So many times, and we allow our enemy to tell us lies.
So, a few of the things that you were just talking through in that, like, kind of jogging my memory, some notes I've got here. Being the more of the videographer, I guess, side of this of this tandem, there's a word in film called hyperrealism.
Okay.
So
educate me.
So hyperrealism is when a movie is going to not feel scripted, and instead of it feeling like a forced narrative where you're being led down a path, as you know, like the Goonies would be, the opposite of the Goonies is leading us down a journey, very forced script
to the treasure.
Hyperrealism is we are living in someone else's life.
Okay.
Hyperrealism is never going to feel scripted or forced. No effects. It's all. This could literally be happening anywhere in America right now.
Right.
And I just felt like this film exuded a lot of those characteristics of hyperrealism, and especially noticeable. And you kind of mentioned one of these moments, but there are several moments in this film that I felt like I was intruding in someone else's life.
Yeah.
I felt like an intruder.
Right.
It was awkward.
Yeah.
And there were moments that in more of a forced narrative that would have 100% never existed.
Right.
But there's the one that really stands out to me is when they go to the hospital, and Lee, is seeing his brother's body in the morgue.
Yeah.
And he has to ride the elevator down with the doctor. And then the doctor gets off the elevator.
Which is good. He's riding the elevator down.
Yep. Yeah, right. He's riding the elevator down with the doctor. And it's this, the entire time they're in the elevator, the camera's rolling.
Yeah.
And it's insanely awkward elevator ride.
Which is just, if you're trying to please the masses, that's bad filmmaking.
That wouldn't be a scene in most movies.
Right. That's bad filmmaking, but it's telling
awkward,
a story.
and it makes you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And then when the door opens, they're both waiting for each other to get off.
Right.
And they both try to leave the elevator at the same time, and almost gets and not like in a comedic way, but just in a like the doctor wants to get this over with, and Lee is just really, I don't know, disturbed, broken individual at this point. Like on top of his
alone.
already loneliness, he just lost his brother.
Yeah.
And then when the doctor just stands there in the most awkward way possible while he's looking at his brother in the morgue.
And there's like 30 seconds of nothing happening.
They're just
and
standing there. And there's a couple more scenes like that. But it just, to me, that gave it that hyper realism that because there's no effects, because there's no vivid imagery, like we were living a moment in someone else's life that was really intense.
And it's real.
Very real. Hyper real.
So it's appropriately named.
Yeah.
Hyperrealism.
So I just, from one of the earliest scenes in that movie, I just kind of looked at this film through the lens of hyperrealism.
And that's what really draws me in, is that sort of, I don't need you to show me what you can do with your camera tricks. I don't need you to show me what you can do with your computers. I don't need that. I want to hear story. And I think that kind of that's the heartbeat of where we're going here, right? Like we want to tell stories. We want to see stories. We want to hear about stories that matter, that make a difference. And that's a great, even those two scenes that I talked about, you feel like you're an intruder there, and you feel like there's something else that's going on that's a part of that picture.
I completely agree. How many times in this movie did you think Lee was going to come around?
I don't know. Like, I was conflicted about even that. Like, I'm hoping, I'm an optimist, and I'm a pastor, so like I feel like, and I'm a very priestly pastor, so like my biggest deal is like I want to show you the glory of what could be. Like I dedicate my life to that idea, and this movie like puts me in that seat.
The glory of what could be is presented to Lee Chandler over and over in this movie, and he can't beat it.
He can't beat the reality of what was.
Yeah.
And I think like that's the metaphor that the flashbacks tell. No matter how many people are trying to get you to see the glory of what could be, the past is still the truth.
Yeah.
It's still the past, and you'll never beat it. So I don't know that I ever got to that point where it was like I thought he was going to beat it, because I was conflicted. I was hopeful, but I also was pretty sure.
Well, and in most narratives in our culture, 99 out of 100 movies, it is going to be
right.
Like,
when that scene with Michelle Williams is like when she says, "I love you. Can we have lunch?"
And he says, "There's
I
nothing
hurt
there."
too. My heart is broken. Can we? Like,
You just
he's
assume
supposed
that's what
to hug her
it's
there.
Yeah. Like,
And-
oh, of course.
Right.
Like, I can have my life back.
But he shuts her down just like that.
There's nothing there.
There's
That's what he
nothing
says.
there.
That's what he tells her.
I
There's
gotta
nothing
go.
there. And he leaves.
I gotta go.
So then he sticks around Manchester longer than he was going to, and he quits his job in Boston, and you think, okay, him and Patty are going to run this boat together,
Yeah.
and it's going to be this beautiful thing.
Right. Yeah.
And then he kind of does an about face, and he signs away guardianship to his buddy, and signs away the trust to his buddy.
Right.
And he tells Patty, I've got a job in Boston that starts in July.
Right.
And then they have the funeral, and it's kind of wrapping up, and you're like, wow, he's really walking away from it. And then all of the actual tangible elements of the movie and the script say, okay, he's walking away, and he's not going to forgive himself. Mm-hmm. And then the last scene, after everything's wrapped up with that bow,
that conversation that they have,
they're walking up this, just very nondescript, Manchester Hill Lane tree. It's just very normal.
That whole scene is perfect. Like, it starts out with them, hey, can I get some ice cream?
Yeah.
And he goes and get some ice cream. And he's like, well, I need some money. And so he gives him some money, and he goes and gets his ice cream. And so he gets to go be happy. And Casey Affleck
Waits
gets
outside.
to provide for his happiness by giving him the money for the ice cream. And then they walk up the hill talking about what's going to happen.
They're bouncing this ball, and kind of back to the hyperrealism aspect. They're bouncing this ball. Like Casey Affleck's just bouncing this bouncy ball as they're walking and talking. And then he bounces it to Patty, just in this really kind of like buddy move.
Right.
And Patty fumbles it.
Yeah.
And it bounces away, and he gets it, and he tries to bounce it back, and he bounces it behind him, and it's just almost awkward.
Yeah.
And it's hyperrealism. Like, they can't bounce the ball back and forth to
Right.
each other. And what does Casey Affleck say after a second of this?
The last words.
The last words
he
of the
bounces
film.
it hets him in the back of the leg, and it starts to roll away. And the last words of the film, the last words that are spoken are, let it go.
Just let it go.
Just let it go.
Great throw. Just let it go.
And then the film ends.
Isn't that incredible?
Oh my God. So, like, they presented it as if it's done. His heart is closed. He took this job in Boston. He left.
Yeah.
And then Just Let It Go makes
Just
me
Let It
think
Go.
that the end of the movie isn't the end of the movie.
Right.
That at some level, even after he signed away guardianship of Patty, that there is hope for Lee Chandler.
That's why I love movies like this that don't wrap it up. Like, you're now, okay, what happens next? That's for you to decide.
Yep.
Does
No,
he
it was
accept forgiveness? And like just before they're bouncing the ball back and forth, they're talking about what he's going to do, and Lee Chandler's looking for an apartment with 2 bedrooms.
Yeah.
Because so you can maybe come visit me.
Yeah.
There's that little glimmer of hope, like he's going to allow somebody into his life.
And then just ending it with even like the camera behind them. It's like to their backs.
Yeah.
And the ball bounces, and like they're literally walking the movie off.
Yeah.
Just let it go. Out of Lee Chandler's mouth.
Yeah.
That's
And so
beautiful.
like
Striking.
the movie reviewing concept I want to put down for a second and say this, like there's forgiveness, you know? And I know we don't want to be too didactic in our gospel application here, but like this is, I think it's really important to see, like just let it go. You can be forgiven, you are forgiven, just accept it.
I can't think of a better way to end this episode.
Yeah.
Than with that idea.
Than me
Just let
preaching
it
the
go.
gospel like that?
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Let it go.
This movie is one that well received by both critics and audiences, and if you haven't seen it, like I said earlier, it's on Prime, so you got no excuse. I think that it's beautiful in its story and in its visually the way it told the story, and I think that like the Goonies last week was allegorical. This was a lot more subtle in its in its kind of revelation of the gospel message to me, but it's very profound nonetheless.
Yeah.
So I would like to thank you for picking this and exposing me to it, because if it meant this much to me, hopefully there's at least one person listening that found something in it as well.
Yeah, it's great. And it teaches you to find the gospel themes in life and music and art.
Come back next week, and it'll be my turn to pick a movie. Have not decided what that'll be yet,
All right.
but get excited. It'll probably be something a little funner and lighter.
Yeah, hopefully.
Can't
How
be
could
heavier.
it not be funnier, not more fun and lighter?
Can't be heavier. So come back next week. Thank you so much for your ears, audience. I know your time is valuable, so we appreciate you spending with us. If you got any value out of this, leave us a good review on whatever platform you're listening, if that's iTunes or Google or wherever. Just give us a favorable review. Recommend us to our friends. Hit that share button on social media. We appreciate you, and hopefully we can bring you value next week. I've been Andrew Crabtree. He has been Rick Maxon, and thank you so much for listening.